5-2, what a performance from Manchester City. I mean, on paper, the hardest game for Manchester City in the group stage of the Club World Cup, but they made light work of it. It was probably their best performance. Juventus admittedly made their own mistakes and tactically had things that Manchester City could certainly pick apart. We'll get into that throughout this video. But Manchester City were really impressive on their own. The performances of individuals in this game, I really want to highlight those throughout the video. In fact, I want to begin by talking about Ryan Aït-Nouri, who really stood out to me in that first half. There were a few players who stood out to me in that first half, actually. I made a tweet at half-time saying Bernardo Silva was really impressive. Jeremy Doku was massively impressive. Ryan Aït-Nouri as well really stood out for me. And Tijani Reinders as well. Those four players were maximally impressive in that first half. But Ryan Aït-Nouri, let's talk about him, because I didn't get a chance to talk about him after the last game. It was at 2 a.m. I wasn't going to watch that game given everything else I have to do, but he was really impressive when I watched the extended highlights of that game, and today it was a joy to sit and watch him play. The flexibility that he allows Guardiola to play with, and the systems and the in-game tweaks that he allows Guardiola to play with, because he is so versatile, is a joy to watch. Manchester City, we've not really had a proper left-back in the team for years and years. I think Benjamin Mendy was the last proper left-back that we had. And if we just go back to last season, for example, Nico O'Reilly did a brilliant job in there, but he's normally a box-to-box or a number 10, perhaps even a player in the front line of attack. And he did a really good job there in that back line with Matheus Nunes, again, as a makeshift fullback on the other side to help us secure Champions League football. But when you see the difference, and this is not a slight on Nico O'Reilly, he's a brilliant footballer, but when you see the difference in a proper left back, you really get to appreciate just how good and how necessary it is to get specialist players in those positions. And I'm going to go into a little bit of the role and the system that Guardiola did opt for today. But in talking about Ryan Aït-Nouri, he played as somebody who held the width in build-up, somebody who dropped in and played next to Rodri in build-up at times, somebody who played in number 8 positions. He floated out and played completely on that flank as a winger at times as well. He did it all, and that versatility allowed other players to rotate into zones. Juventus, I think a big point to talk about is the fact that they played man-to-man across the pitch. In the first half, in the second half, they played man-to-man across the entirety of the game, except the last sort of 10-15 minutes when they got really tired and they were down by, I think, 3 or 4 goals. In those stages, I think they just didn't want to press man-to-man, and they actually conceded a bit less, and they ended up scoring with Vlahovic as well at the end. So generally, that man-to-man pressure was exploited by Manchester City's really high technical quality and the rotations that players like Ryan Aït-Nouri facilitated on that flank. And it looks to be an incredible partnership that's blossoming is Jeremy Doku alongside Ryan Aït-Nouri. And Jeremy Doku was really impressive in that first half in particular. He's been really good in this tournament in general, and he's added a few facets to his game that we've seen in glimpses, but he's adding it a little bit more consistently, in my opinion. In the last 3 games in all competitions, whether for Belgium or Manchester City, he's scored a goal in. So getting that shot volume up and getting that decisive sort of goal and assist quality to his game would be magnificent. He's one of the best, if not the best, 1v1 dribbler in world football. And he gets into incredibly dangerous positions. But if he's in those dangerous positions, you need to take your chances, whether that's putting the ball in good areas for teammates to put them away or scoring goals yourself. And it was brilliant to see him get on the score sheet for that goal. Ryan Aït-Nouri's contribution to that goal can't be understated either. That slide pass almost feels like a David Silva or Kevin De Bruyne pass when you've got that man-to-man pressure across the pitch. Switching it to the other side without having the Juventus midfielders shift over in time allowed him that space and that time to play that pass. But it was that diagonal run into the box that Doku made that was brilliant and allowed him to get in a good chance to put that goal away. If I'm talking about that diagonal run, actually, the run that Nunes made for Haaland's goal, and we're skipping ahead here, it was the 3rd goal, but the assist that Nunes made for Erling Haaland, he made this out to in diagonal run in a kind of a transition situation, but that run is a hallmark of Mohamed Salah's game. Pep Linders obviously coming from Liverpool to Manchester City. That Doku out to in movement as well reminds me of how Mo Salah does end up in goal scoring positions. And I don't know if I'm making a little bit of a reach there, but that is something that is one to keep in mind, those diagonal out to in runs and getting your wingers in the box in dangerous positions. And whether that's something that Pep Linders has been working on, or whether that's just something that Guardiola's putting a little bit more onus on, given the quality of players in midfield to play those passes, I'm not sure. But I certainly want to keep an eye on because it's been brilliant, and it was the source of 2 goals, the first and the third. If we're talking about the second goal, and I want to talk about Nunes because I feel like he doesn't get his flowers. Last season, look, he did make some mistakes, but I think his mistakes are magnified because obviously they look worse. His mistakes tend to be very obvious, kind of clumsy mistakes, but on the grand scheme of things, he's somebody who really tries. He puts himself in positions where he might make a mistake, but he doesn't shy away. He keeps going. He defends well for somebody who plays out of position. He chipped in with loads of assists last season, whether or not that was during his stint at left wing, which, you know, people forget he played left wing in, I think, De Bruyne's absence. He was probably the only player who had a really solid final ball on him in that period, and he found Haaland on numerous occasions. Savinho actually was good during that time as well. And then he moved to right back, and he'd been really impressive there, albeit with some defensive mistakes. But that's all being slowly ironed out of his game. Manchester City are obviously looking for a proper right back. I think Livramento's the name being mentioned. It'll be hard for us to pry him away from Newcastle. But even if we have Nunes as that main right back, or if he stays as a secondary right back, as the backup option to a more, normal traditional right back, I would love for him to continue to play because he was really brilliant. He worked hard, the way he pressed the opposition, and this is in really hot, unfavourable conditions. There was that period in the game where it was pouring it down. I love to see that. As a Manchester boy myself, I feel a bit at home when I see that rain falling down. And also I think the crowd got behind that weather change, and I think Manchester City actually upped the tempo a little bit as well when it did start raining. I don't know if they felt like they were playing back at the Etihad. But yeah, back to Nunes. Brilliant running in behind throughout this game. He made a great cross as well that forced the goal, the second goal, the own goal for Juventus. Yeah, I just wanted to give him his roses because I think he's done a really selfless job for Manchester City over the last year and a half, and people don't necessarily give him his praise, but he certainly looked like a natural in that side today. Am I missing anybody else in that first half? Oh yes, I am. I'm missing Reinders. I'm not going to talk about everybody, but I want to talk about Reinders in particular because he's offering Manchester City something that they've lacked for certainly the last season. I think Gundogan, when he played higher up last season, towards the end of the season, with minutes in his legs and with a bit more, rhythm and fitness, he was making these runs in behind and pushing the defence back. But Reinders does it with a tenacity and a frequency that I've not really seen from a Manchester City player since perhaps Raheem Sterling, who was the best at running in behind for us that I can remember, certainly for a long, long time. And those consistent runs in behind, it was very difficult for Juventus to pick them up. Juventus were fairly static in their back line. They were trying to block space when they got penned really deep, and it was almost like a 5-5-0 at times for Juventus in that shape. But yeah, Manchester City shifted the ball from side to side really well, and those consistent deep runs, particularly from Reinders, meant that they weren't able to be picked up by the opposition. And when those vertical passes were played by some of the more talented midfielders that we've now got back in our team, Rodri, for example, Aït-Nouri, obviously not a midfielder, but somebody who can play those quality passes. In general, the technical floor of the team has been raised, and it gives you solutions across the pitch. The physical floor of the team has been raised, and it allows you to make those runs in behind, but also get back to defend and also counter press. And Manchester City really pen Juventus in their counter pressing, in their ability to win the ball back really high and continue to cycle through those attacks. That consistent pressure, it destroys teams mentally. It's a hallmark of Pep Linders. I don't want to give him too much credit because he's only been there for a little while, but it's certainly got the stamp of a Pep Linders side or a Pep Linders inspired kind of scheme. And I think Guardiola would have wanted him to come in because he's probably thought, I need to improve my out of possession side, and I might as well get one of the best in the world at doing so, having been under Jurgen Klopp for so many years. So that counter-pressing, that intensity, that ability to recycle, apply pressure and break teams down through, tiring them out in such, warm conditions, but also in tiring them out mentally. In the second half, we saw Erling Haaland come on, and he scored the most clumsy goal I've seen him score. It kind of bounced off his leg in a way he didn't mean to, but he was in the position to put that chance away. And it was good that he got on the score sheet. It was really nice to see that in general, with the way that Juventus played, they wanted to press Manchester City really high, even when it appeared like it wasn't working. And to counter that, Manchester City set up in a unique way. I don't know if this is the way that Manchester City want to set up going forward in general, or if this is just a Juventus-specific build-up scheme. I think it's probably something we'll see in general. I've got a tactics board here. I don't know how I'm going to do this with a mic. As you can see, there's a 2+1 with the goalkeeper on that side where my fingers are here. And this is from a Manchester City goal kick, we're assuming. Obviously, Juventus went man-to-man, so they followed players out of their normal positions. The back line of Juventus and their central defenders stepped out into midfield, and it was kind of very chaotic and all over the place. But in general, they kind of played this sort of 5-2-3 or 5-3-2 shape. In my demonstration here, I've got them as a 5-2-3. And as you can see, Manchester City got that 2+1 and then Rodri in front of them. And it was almost like a 2-1-2-5, which sounds a bit mental, but as you can see by the tactics board, hopefully it demonstrates what I'm trying to explain. And then obviously the two ahead of Rodri were Reinders and Bernardo Silva, and they obviously dropped in situationally to provide an extra body and also increase the distance between this front three. Now, as you can see, the front three, you've got your number 9, but you've got your wingers who have moved a bit more centrally and a bit deeper. So it forces the opposition's backline to either step out or give them space in those areas. Manchester City built with more players in deeper areas to then find the players in attack more directly in space to then go at Juventus's defenders 1v1. In the wide areas, you've got your two fullbacks in Núñez and Aït-Nouri. So I'm going to pop this down. I just wanted to show you guys that to highlight how Manchester City created space vertically and also horizontally, but primarily vertically, going the length of the pitch to play a little bit more direct. And obviously Marmoush got on the end of some of those chances. Doku got on the end of some of those chances. Savinho was really impressive. I've not mentioned him too much, and I don't want this video to go on too long, but he was really impressive. His goal, absolutely incredible. But Erling Haaland, in my opinion, made the most of these more direct passages of play, which again almost feel a little bit Liverpool-like, but I think Guardiola wants to include a big variety in how he does attack, and this was the right way and the most effective way to attack this Juventus side who tried to apply a lot of pressure high up the pitch. Guardiola has done this as well over the last season and a half, possibly 2 seasons. The signing of Marmoush and how he's been used has been a perfect example of Guardiola's tendency to go a little bit more direct. The game against Arsenal a couple of years ago where De Bruyne was outstanding was predicated on Ederson playing really long into Haaland and De Bruyne, and that 2-man up top really made the difference against Arsenal trying to press high man-to-man against Manchester City in that game as well. So Guardiola's been doing it for a couple of years, but this was a brilliant example of that. And Erling Haaland, when you see him in those big spaces, I mean, wow. Look, a lot of people talk about Haaland not being the most complete forward in the world. I think it does him a big disservice to downplay his completeness, because at Manchester City, he's not necessarily, given the chance to play in these big spaces, to carry the ball, to dribble, to play these incisive passes on the carry. He's improved his back-to-goal play, dropping deep and linking play with, the number 8s in and around him. But his ability, especially at Dortmund, and we've seen it on show today again, to pick up the ball, drive, and really dribble like a winger at defenders, cut inside and play these passes that we saw for Phil Foden's goal, for example, is genuinely really impressive. It's kind of sad that we've not got to see that version of Erling Haaland very much. Obviously, it comes at the expense of him literally scoring 40-odd goals and playing for a team that wins trophies fairly reliably. But a part of me wishes that Erling Haaland played for a team that got the best out of his more all-round game, because I think, general football fans and particularly football purists would appreciate his game and his variety in the way he can attack, particularly from deeper areas. I do think with Guardiola's Manchester City moving into this season, we might see more forced and more deliberate transition situations where Erling Haaland can kind of showcase that quality with some other players who can crash the box, such as Reinders, with that brilliant physical base. Phil Foden as well, and Doku coming in from that left-hand side if he is to be a mainstay in this team. But yeah, Erling Haaland, really impressive. I just wanted to touch upon that as a tactic and also him as a player in this game. Manchester City really looked like they're back. I don't want to be too premature in saying that, but you've got brilliant technicians all over the park. You've got this collective joy where it seems like each player playing wants to play and also enjoys playing with the teammates in and around them. They trust the new signings. There's brilliant little chemistries being formed across the pitch. Aït-Nouri and Doku, Erling Haaland and Phil Foden have a good chemistry. I think Reinders is making brilliant runs in behind and he's being picked up by Rodri. Reinders and Núñez is a very underrated partnership so far being formed, with Núñez's willingness to run into the channels and Reinders' willingness to play vertically. vertically. It's a really nice partnership that we're seeing on that side. And Savinho and Nunes as well, having a good performance and a good understanding between themselves. Yeah, it's been a joy to see Guardiola's implementation of these new players, this new system. Certainly this game was really impressive, and I think Manchester City have been one of the most impressive teams, if not the most impressive team in the Club World Cup so far. From a pure quality perspective, there's been teams I've been really fond of watching, the Sundowns, for example. But if I'm talking about pure quality on the football pitch, Manchester City certainly look like they're back. And yeah, there'll be one to contend with for the rest of this tournament for everybody else in that tournament. Let me know what you thought of that performance and who your standouts were. And I'll catch you again in tomorrow's video. We're keeping the momentum going. Come on, boys. We're alive. We're building a beautiful space to talk about football in. And I really enjoy it. And I hope you guys do too. See you again tomorrow.